You honestly thought I would choose you. The word sliced through the grand hall like a blade, and every conversation died. Kira felt her breath catch, felt the weight of 300 eyes turning toward her. The Alpha's brother, Damon, stood on the raised platform, his handsome face twisted with something between amusement and disgust. She forced herself to meet his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. I never asked you to. Then let me make it clear, Damon said, his voice rising, carrying to every corner of the stone chamber. Before everyone, I reject you, Kira of the Ashwood Pack. You are not worthy to stand beside me. The laughter started slow, a ripple that grew into a wave. Female wolves who had eyed her with suspicion now covered their mouths, their eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. Male wolves shook their heads as if they'd known all along this would be her fate. The sound crashed over her, drowning out the frantic beating of her heart. Kira's hands trembled at her sides. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear into the floor, but her legs wouldn't move. The humiliation burned through her chest like poison. Then a voice cut through the chaos, cold as winter frost and sharp as steel. Say that again, brother, and you will kneel. The laughter died instantly. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kira's head snapped toward the source of the voice, and her breath caught for an entirely different reason. Alpha King Thuron stood from his throne at the far end of the hall, his massive frame unfolding with predatory grace. His silver eyes blazed with something dark and dangerous, fixed entirely on his brother. The power radiating from him made the air itself feel heavy, oppressive. Every wolf in the room instinctively lowered their heads, including Damon. Thuron, Damon started, but the Alpha King raised one hand and silence fell like a guillotine. No one knew it yet, but in that moment everything changed. The pack would never be the same, and Kira's life was about to become something she couldn't have imagined in her darkest dreams or wildest hopes. But to understand how they arrived at this moment, you have to go back. Back to the day Kira arrived at the Silvermoon pack, alone and unwanted, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart too stubborn to break. 4 days earlier, the gates of the Silvermoon territory were more intimidating than Kira had imagined. Massive iron bars, intricately worked with wolves and moons, stretched 20 feet high. Beyond them, she could see the pack houses spreading across rolling hills, smoke rising from chimneys, wolves moving with the confidence of those who had never known exile or shame. She stood at those gates with her single bag clutched in both hands, feeling smaller than she had in years. You going to stand there all day, or you actually going in? The guard's voice was bored, dismissive. He barely looked at her, his attention on some papers attached to a clipboard. I'm expected, Kira said, hatting how uncertain her voice sounded. Kira Ashwood, I'm here for the selection. Yeah, I got the notice. He finally looked up, his eyes scanning her from head to toe with undisguised disdain. You're late, been waiting for you since yesterday. The bus broke down in Crescent Falls. I had to wait. Don't care, he waved her through, already turning back to his clipboard. Report to the main house, someone will tell you where to bunk. The gates swung open with a metallic groan, and Kira stepped through into a world that made her feel like an intruder. Everything was bigger here, grander. The main house, calling it a house was laughable. It was practically a mansion, stood at the heart of the territory, all stone and timber, and leaded glass windows that caught the afternoon sun. Wolves stopped what they were doing to watch her pass. A group of females, all beautiful and well-dressed, whispered behind their hands. A cluster of males appraised her with the kind of look that made her skin crawl. Children playing near one of the houses fell silent, staring with the brutal honesty only kids possessed. She didn't belong here, everyone knew it, she knew it. The question was whether anyone would give her a chance anyway. You must be the Ashwood girl. Kira turned to find a woman approaching, middle-aged with sharp features and sharper eyes. She wore practical clothes but carried herself with authority. Yes, ma'am, Kira Ashwood. I'm Elena, the house manager. You'll answer to me while you're here. Elena's gaze was assessing but not unkind. You were supposed to arrive yesterday. I'm sorry, I heard buses are unreliable in the outer territories. Elena gestured for her to follow. Come, I'll show you where you'll be staying. The selection ceremony is in 3 days, so you don't have much time to prepare. As they walked toward the main house, Kira gathered her courage. Can I ask, how many girls are here for the selection? 12, including you. The Alpha's brother will choose one as his mate. Elena glanced at her sideways. I won't lie to you, girl, most of the others come from prominent packs. They've been preparing for this for months. You're an outsider, Kira finished quietly. A latecomer, Elena corrected, but the meaning was the same. They entered the main house through a side door, and Kira's breath caught despite herself. The interior was even more magnificent than the exterior: polished wood floors, tapestries depicting pack history, a grand staircase that swept upward like something from a fairy tale. The Alpha King's quarters are in the west wing, Elena said, leading her up a narrower staircase. Off limits to everyone except by direct invitation. The Alpha's brother, Damon, has the east wing. The girls selected for the ceremony are housed on the second floor, north side. You'll share a room with 2 others. The Alpha King, Kira said hesitantly. Will he be involved in the selection? Elena's expression shifted, became guarded. Alpha King Thuron oversees all pack business, but the ceremony is for his brother to choose a mate. Why do you ask? Just curious. They reached a hallway lined with doors. Female voices drifted from behind some of them, laughter and conversation. Elena stopped at the third door on the left and knocked briefly before opening it. 2 girls looked up from where they sat on beds. Both were beautiful in that effortless way some she-wolves had, with glossy hair and perfect skin and eyes that assessed Kira in a single glance and found her wanting. This is Kira Ashwood, Elena announced. She'll be your roommate. Kira, this is Miranda and Celeste. Hi, Kira offered, trying for a smile. Miranda returned a cool nod. Celeste didn't even do that, turning back to the mirror where she was styling her hair. Dinner is at 7 in the main hall, Elena said. Don't be late. She left without another word, and Kira was alone with her new roommates. The silence stretched awkwardly. Finally, Miranda spoke. That bed is yours. She gestured to a narrow bed against the far wall, clearly the least desirable of the 3. Try not to touch our things. I won't, Kira said quietly, setting her bag on the bed. Where are you from? Celeste asked, still focused on her reflection but clearly listening. Ashwood Pack, it's... I know where it is, Celeste interrupted. Outer territories, border region, your pack is what, maybe 100 wolves? Around that, Kira admitted. Celeste met her eyes in the mirror, and her smile was sharp as broken glass. The Silvermoon pack has over 3,000, just so you understand the difference in what we're used to. The message was clear: you don't belong here. Kira unpacked her few belongings in silence while her roommates continued getting ready for dinner, discussing strategies for catching Damon's eye as if she weren't there. She learned that Celeste's father was an alpha of a northern pack, that Miranda's family controlled key trade routes, that both of them had been groomed for this opportunity their entire lives. What did Kira have? A family that had traded her presence here for debt relief, a pack that had been struggling for years and saw her as expendable, skills as a healer, which meant nothing in a pack this size with dozens of trained healers. She had nothing, she was nothing. But she was here and she would see it through. When 7 o'clock came, Kira followed Miranda and Celeste down to the main hall, which was even more impressive than the rest of the house. Long tables stretched the length of the room, already filled with pack members. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat the high table where the pack leadership would eat. Currently it was empty. The Alpha's brother sits there, Miranda said, noticing Kira's gaze, when he chooses to dine with the pack. And the Alpha King. But sometimes he's selective about when he appears. They found seats at one of the long tables with several other selection candidates. Introductions were made, names Kira tried to remember. All the girls were beautiful, confident, clearly from good families. They talked about politics and pack alliances with the ease of those raised in that world. Kira picked at her food and tried to be invisible. I heard he's going to announce the ceremony schedule tonight, one girl said, her voice pitched with excitement. Maybe we'll finally see him. I've seen him every day this week, another girl, Lydia, said smugly. He smiled at me yesterday. Damon smiles at everyone, someone else retorted, and a small argument erupted. Kira tuned them out, her attention drifting around the hall. So many wolves, all moving with the unconscious grace of their kind, so much power and confidence. She felt like a shadow among them. Then the hall's energy shifted, conversations faltered, heads turned. Kira looked up and felt her heart stutter. 2 men had entered through a side door and were walking toward the high table. Both were tall, powerfully built, radiating alpha dominance, but one of them— "That's him," Miranda hissed. "That's Damon." The alpha's brother was handsome in a classical way, strong jaw, dark hair, warm brown eyes that scanned the hall with practiced charm. When his gaze swept over their table, several girls sat up straighter, smiles blooming on their faces. He returned a roguish grin that made them giggle. But Kira barely noticed him. Her attention was locked on the other man. Alpha King Thuron. He was taller than his brother, broader in the shoulders, with hair so dark it was almost black and eyes like molten silver. Where Damon's expression was open and charming, Thuron's was closed, unreadable, carved from stone. He moved with the lethal grace of a predator, and the power rolling off him made Kira's wolf stir for the first time since she'd arrived. He reached the high table and sat without looking at anyone. Damon, by contrast, paused to wave at the selection candidates, earning another flutter of giggles and whispers. If you're wondering what happens when the most powerful alpha in the territory notices the girl everyone else has dismissed, stay with me, because this story is just beginning. "He's perfect," Celeste breathed beside Kira. "He smiled right at me," Lydia insisted from across the table. Kira said nothing. She wasn't looking at Damon anymore. Her eyes kept drifting to the Alpha King, to the way he sat in absolute stillness while his brother charmed the room. There was something magnetic about that stillness, something that drew her even as it intimidated her. As if sensing her stare, Thuron's eyes suddenly shifted, locked on her. For one breathless moment, their gazes held. His silver eyes were unreadable, intense, searching. Kira felt stripped bare under that look, felt her wolf rising to meet something in him that called to her on a level she didn't understand. Then Damon stood to speak, and Thuron's attention shifted away, leaving Kira feeling strangely bereft. "Welcome, ladies," Damon said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "I know you've all travelled far to be here, and I'm honoured by your presence. The selection ceremony will take place in 3 days during the full moon. Until then, please enjoy our hospitality. Get to know our pack, our territory. I look forward to meeting each of you personally." Another chorus of excited whispers. Kira barely heard them, because as Damon spoke, she caught movement from the corner of her eye. Thuron had leaned toward one of his advisors, listening to something said in a low voice, but his eyes kept flickering back to her. She told herself she was imagining it. The meal continued with much chatter and speculation. The other candidates discussed their strategies, what they would wear, how they would approach Damon. Kira ate mechanically, her mind spinning. After dinner, as wolves began filtering out of the hall, Miranda grabbed Kira's arm. "Come on, Damon sometimes walks the gardens after dinner. If we hurry, we might run into him." "I'm tired," Kira said. "I think I'll just go back to the room." Miranda's expression hardened. "Suit yourself, but don't complain when the rest of us are actually making an effort." She and Celeste swept away with several other candidates, leaving Kira alone at the table. She waited a few more minutes, then stood to leave. "You're not joining the others." Kira spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Alpha King Thuron stood less than 10 feet away, his silver eyes fixed on her with that same unsettling intensity. Up close, he was even more imposing, easily 6.5 feet of solid muscle, with a presence that made her wolf want to simultaneously submit and challenge him. She struggled to find words. "I'm tired from travelling, Your Majesty." "Thuron," he said. "In private you can call me Thuron." "We're not in private," she pointed out before she could stop herself, then immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." "You're right, we're not." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement. "What's your name?" Kira Ashwood." Ashwood, he seemed to consider this. Border territory, small pack. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "Yes." "Why are you here, Kira Ashwood?" The question caught her off guard. "For the selection, like the others." "That's what you're doing here," I asked why. She met his eyes, deciding honesty was better than whatever pretty lie he'd heard a dozen times already. "My pack needed an alliance. I was the option they had available." "So you were sent, not volunteered." "Does it matter?" "Perhaps not." He took a step closer and Kira's pulse jumped. He was studying her face like he was trying to memorize every feature. "Do you want to be chosen?" Did she? The honest answer was complicated. She didn't want to be rejected and humiliated. She didn't want to go home having failed. But did she actually want Damon to choose her, to bind herself to a man she didn't know in a pack where she'd always be an outsider? "I want to belong somewhere," she said finally. Theron's expression shifted just slightly. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "My brother is charming, wolves like him. He'll make a good choice for his mate, I'm sure." "I'm sure he will," Kira agreed, though something in Theron's tone made the words feel hollow. "But charm isn't everything, Kira Ashwood, remember that." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the emptying hall with her heart racing and her mind full of questions she couldn't answer. What did the Alpha King want? Why had he approached her specifically when he could have spoken to any of the other candidates, all of whom were more beautiful, more accomplished, more suitable? And why did his presence make her wolf react like nothing else ever had? She didn't have answers, so she went back to her room and lay awake long into the night, listening to Miranda and Celeste whisper about their accidental encounter with Damon in the gardens, while her mind replayed 5 minutes of conversation with a man who wasn't even part of the selection. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and increasing tension. The selection candidates were given tour of the territory, introduced to key pack members, taught the basics of Silvermoon protocol. Kira struggled to keep up, overwhelmed by the complexity of it all. The other girls, meanwhile, seemed to thrive. They knew how to navigate pack politics, how to charm and flirt and position themselves advantageously. They formed alliances and rivalries with equal ease, and Kira found herself increasingly isolated. Not that she minded the isolation, it was familiar, almost comfortable. What wasn't comfortable were the looks she kept getting, from pack members who wondered what she was doing there, from the other candidates who saw her as beneath their notice, from guards and servants who treated her with barely concealed disdain. And from the Alpha King, whose silver eyes found her at unexpected moments, always watching, always assessing. She saw Damon too, of course. He was everything the girls said, charming, attentive, seemingly genuine in his interest in getting to know each candidate. When he spoke to Kira during a group tea on the second day, he was kind and courteous, asking about her pack and her journey. She should have been flattered. Instead, she felt nothing. It was Theron's gaze that made her pulse race, Theron's rare words that echoed in her mind, Theron's presence that made her wolf stir with something like recognition. Which made no sense because Theron wasn't choosing a mate, Damon was. On the evening before the ceremony, Elena gathered all the candidates in the main hall. "Tomorrow night during the full moon, Alpha Damon will make his choice," she announced. "You'll each be presented formally. He may ask you questions. At the end of the evening, he'll declare his chosen mate. The rest of you will be free to return to your packs with our gratitude for participating." "What kind of questions?" Lydia asked. "That's for the Alpha to decide. Be prepared for anything." After Elena dismissed them, the girls scattered to make final preparations. Kira returned to her room to find Miranda and Celeste in a state of high excitement. "I heard from one of the servants that Damon's already decided," Miranda said. "He's just doing the ceremony for tradition." "Who did he choose?" Celeste demanded. "She didn't know, but it has to be one of us, right? We're the only ones from prominent families." They both looked at Kira then, and their smiles were pitying. "Don't feel bad," Celeste said with full sweetness. "You were never really in the running anyway. Your pack probably just wanted to say they sent someone." Kira bit back a dozen responses and settled for a quiet, "Probably." She left the room before they could say anything else, needing air, needing space. Without really thinking about it, she found herself walking through the corridors toward the back of the house, away from the noise and the other wolves. She ended up in a small courtyard she hadn't seen before, lit by lanterns and empty except for the night wind. For the first time in days she could breathe. "Hiding." She jumped, spinning to find Theron emerging from the shadows. He moved so quietly for such a large man, and her heart hammered against her ribs. "Just thinking," she said. "About tomorrow." "Yes." He moved closer, and she noticed he wasn't in his usual formal attire. He wore simple dark clothes, and his hair was slightly disheveled as if he'd been running, or shifting. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Should I be? Most of the others are." I'm not most of the others. His lips curved in what might have been a smile. No, you're not. Want to know what happens when an alpha king sees something in you that no one else does? Keep listening, because tomorrow night's ceremony is going to change everything. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and Kira found herself speaking before she thought better of it. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Why do you keep looking at me? Theron's silver eyes met hers, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because you're the only one who doesn't try to be seen. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't it? Every other candidate performs, smiles when they think someone important is watching, laughs at jokes that aren't funny, pretends to be interested in conversations that bore them. He took another step closer. You don't, you're the same alone as you are in a crowd. That's rare. Maybe I'm just not good at pretending, Kira said. Or maybe you're honest, also rare. She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know why the most powerful alpha in the territory was standing in a dark courtyard, telling her she was rare when tomorrow his brother would choose someone else. Someone better. I should go, she said finally. It's late. Kira, his voice stopped her as she turned to leave. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're stronger than you know. Don't let them make you forget that. She looked back at him at the intensity in his silver eyes and felt something shift in her chest. Why do you care? I don't know yet, he admitted, but I do. Then he was gone, disappearing back into the shadows like he'd never been there at all, leaving Kira alone with a racing heart and the terrible, impossible feeling that she was standing on the edge of something that would either destroy her or transform her completely. The ceremony hall was magnificent. Hundreds of candles cast dancing shadows across the stone walls. Pack members filled every available space, dressed in their finest, buzzing with anticipation. At the far end on the raised platform sat 2 thrones, one for the Alpha King, one for his brother. Kira stood with the other 11 candidates in a side chamber, waiting to be called. The girls were radiant in flowing gowns, hair elaborately styled, jewels glinting at their throats and wrists. Next to them in her simple blue dress and unadorned hair, Kira felt like a shadow. I can't believe this is actually happening, Miranda whispered, her eyes bright with excitement. One of us is going to be the future Alpha's mate, Celeste agreed. By the end of tonight, everything changes. Kira pressed her palms against her thighs to keep them from shaking. She told herself it didn't matter if Damon chose her or not. She told herself she'd be fine either way. She was a terrible liar. The doors opened and Elena appeared. It's time. They filed out in the order they'd been assigned, Kira somewhere in the middle. The hall fell silent as they entered, every eye tracking their progress. They formed a line at the base of the platform, heads bowed respectfully. Kira risked a glance upward. Theron sat on the left throne, imposing and unreadable in formal black. His silver eyes swept over the candidates once briefly, before settling somewhere in the middle distance. Damon sat on the right and he was smiling, warm, welcoming, looking at each girl like she was already special to him. My friends, Damon began, his voice carrying easily through the hall. Tonight we honor tradition. The choosing of a mate is sacred, a bond that will strengthen our pack and our future. I've had the pleasure of meeting each of these remarkable women, and I'm humbled by their presence. He stood, descending the platform to walk along the line. He paused at each girl, asking a question or making a comment. Lydia blushed when he complimented her dress. Miranda glowed when he asked about her family's territory. Celeste practically purred when he took her hand. Then he reached Kira. His brown eyes were kind as they met hers. Kira Ashwood, from the border territories. Yes, Alpha, she said quietly. Tell me, what do you think is the most important quality in a mate? The hall was silent, waiting. Kira felt the weight of hundreds of stares. Honesty, she said finally. Everything else can be learned or built, but without honesty there's no foundation. Damon's expression flickered with something she couldn't read. Interesting answer, thank you, Kira. He moved on to the next girl, and Kira released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The ceremony continued with formal presentations, pack law recitations and blessings from the elders. Kira's mind drifted, her attention wandering to Theron. He sat motionless, his face giving nothing away, but she could feel his presence like a physical weight. Finally, Damon returned to the platform. I've made my decision, he announced, and the hall held its collective breath. But before I reveal my choice, I want to be clear about something. The woman I choose will be my mate, yes, but she'll also be judged by every member of this pack. She'll need to be strong, worthy, able to command respect. He looked down at the line of candidates and his expression shifted, became harder. Some of you are clearly worthy of that role, he continued. You come from powerful families, you understand pack politics, you were raised for positions of leadership. His eyes moved along the line, skipping over several girls until they landed on Kira. And some of you were not. The first stirrings of unease rippled through Kira's chest. Kira Ashwood, Damon said, his voice clear and cold. Step forward. Her legs moved before her brain caught up. She walked to the center of the line, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Damon descended the platform again, stopping directly in front of her. Up close, his kind expression was gone, replaced with something that made her wolf growl in warning. Tell me, he said quietly, though still loud enough for the hall to hear, why would I choose you? Kira opened her mouth, closed it. You come from a failing pack. You have no political connections, no valuable skills, nothing to offer except, he gestured vaguely at her. This, do you honestly think that's enough? The humiliation burned through her like acid. Around the hall she heard whispers starting, saw smiles forming on some of the other candidates' faces. I didn't come here expecting to be chosen, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Then why did you come? Because my pack asked me to. Because your pack wanted to trade your presence here for debt relief, Damon corrected. You were sent as payment, Kira, a token. Did you really think I didn't know that? The whispers grew louder. Someone laughed, short, quickly stifled, but there. Kira felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. If you knew, then why call me forward? Why not just? Because I wanted everyone to understand, Damon interrupted. He turned to address the hall, his voice rising. This is what happens when desperation leads to poor decisions, when wolves above their station dare to reach for what they can't have. Maury laughter now, not from everyone but enough to make Kira want to disappear into the floor. You honestly thought I would choose you? Damon asked, turning back to her. His voice dripped with disdain that made her stomach twist. She forced herself to meet his eyes, forced herself to speak even though her voice shook. I never asked you to. Then let me make it clear, Damon said, his voice rising further. Before everyone, I reject you, Kira of the Ashwood pack. You are not worthy to stand beside me. You never were. Go back to your failing pack and tell them their debt remains unpaid. The hall erupted in laughter and jeers. Kira heard fragments through the roaring in her ears. Did she really think? Embarrassing. A waste of time. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The humiliation was complete, total, crushing. Every fear she'd ever had about not being enough, not belonging, being worthless, all of it confirmed in front of hundreds of witnesses. Female wolves who had barely tolerated her presence now laughed openly. Males shook their heads in contempt. Even some of the other candidates couldn't hide their satisfied smiles. Kira tried to turn away, tried to walk back to the line, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Look at her, someone called out. Can't even handle rejection properly. Maury laughter, a female wolf near the front, one of Celeste's friends, called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Maybe if she actually had something to offer besides desperation. The laughter crescendoed. Damon smirked, clearly pleased with how thoroughly he'd made his point. And Kira stood there, dying inside, wanting nothing more than to run but unable to give them that satisfaction too. Then a voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Say that again, brother, and you will kneel. Every sound in the hall died instantly. The temperature dropped. The air itself seemed to compress under the weight of barely contained fury. Kira's head snapped toward the platform where Alpha King Thuron now stood, and the sight of him stole what little breath she had left. His silver eyes blazed with an rage so fierce it made her wolf whimper. Every line of his body screamed lethal intent. The dominance rolling off him was so powerful that wolves throughout the hall began dropping their heads, unable to hold themselves upright under the crushing weight of it. Including Damon, whose smirk had vanished, replaced with shock and something that looked like fear. Thuron, Damon started, his voice uncertain. I was just... Silence. One word spoken quietly, but the command in it was absolute. Thuron descended the platform with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd parted before him like water before a shark. He didn't look at anyone except his brother, and the expression on his face promised violence. He stopped directly between Damon and Kira, his back to her, shielding her from the crowd. "You dare," Thuron said, his voice low and deadly, "to mock a wolf in my territory, during a sacred ceremony, in violation of pack law that has stood for 300 years. She's not," Damon tried. "She is a guest, she was invited. She stands under my protection, as does every wolf who enters these gates." Thuron took another step closer to his brother. "Did you forget that, or did you simply not care?" The hall was deathly silent, no one even breathed. Damon's face had gone pale. "I didn't mean to violate pack law, I just wanted to make clear that she wasn't." "Wasn't what, worthy?" Thuron's laugh was bitter. "You want to talk about worth, brother? Let's discuss how you just humiliated a guest to make yourself feel superior, how you encouraged the pack to join in that humiliation, how you violated laws I have sworn to uphold." He turned slightly, his silver eyes finding Kira for just a moment. "And how you were too blind to see what was standing right in front of you." Then he turned back to the crowd, his voice rising to fill every corner of the hall. "By pack law, any wolf mocked during a choosing ceremony is entitled to recompense. Any alpha who violates this law forfeits his right to choose and must submit to the judgment of his king." His eyes swept across the stunned faces. "I am your king, and I declare this ceremony void." Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Damon looked like he'd been slapped. "Thuron, you can't," he started. "I can, I have, this ceremony is over." Thuron's gaze moved slowly across the 12 candidates, lingering on each face before moving to the next. When his eyes found Kira, they stopped, held, and something in them made her heart stutter. Then he did something that made the entire hall gasp. He walked directly to Kira, stood before her, and in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber, he spoke words that would change everything. "Kira Ashwood, I claim you as my mate, by pack law, by blood, and by the will of my wolf. Do you accept?" The world tilted. Kira heard the words but couldn't process them, couldn't make sense of what was happening. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the territory, was claiming her, after she'd just been publicly humiliated and rejected. Her voice came out as a whisper, "I don't understand." "You don't have to understand, not yet." His silver eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. "I'm asking if you accept my claim. Yes or no, Kira, the choice is yours." Around them the hall erupted in chaos. Wolves shouting, arguing, demanding explanations. The other candidates looked shell-shocked. Damon stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and growing anger. But Kira barely heard any of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the man standing before her, offering her something she didn't dare believe was real. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you choose me?" "Because my wolf knew you the moment you walked through those gates," Thuron said simply. "Because you're stronger than you know, and because I'm done watching you be treated like you're nothing when you're everything." Tears burned in her eyes, but this time she let them fall. "Yes," she whispered, "I accept." Thuron's hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite his size. "Then it's done." He turned to face the crowd, pulling Kira against his side with one arm. The gesture was possessive, protective, unmistakable. "Kira Ashwood is now my claimed mate," he declared, his voice ringing with authority. "She stands under my protection. She will be treated with the respect due to the future lunar queen of this pack. Anyone who challenges this will answer to me personally." The hall fell silent. No one challenged, no one dared. Damon found his voice first. "This is madness, Thuron, you can't just—" "I can, I have. And if you question my right to do so again, brother, you'll find yourself living in the outer territories instead of my house." The threat was clear, cold, absolute. Damon's mouth snapped shut. Thuron looked at the pack elders, who stood in shocked silence. "Is there any wolf here who disputes my right to claim a mate of my choosing?" No one spoke. Several elders shook their heads. "Then this ceremony is concluded." Thuron's arm tightened around Kira. "Everyone out now." The pack filed out in stunned silence, shooting glances at Kira that ranged from shock to envy to outright hostility. The other candidates looked devastated, their dreams of becoming an alpha's mate shattered in an instant. Miranda caught Kira's eye as she passed. and the hatred in her gaze was so intense it made Kira flinch. Within minutes, the hall was empty except for Kira and Theron, and the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Think this is a happy ending? Think the Alpha King's claim means Kira is safe? You have no idea what's coming. Because in a pack of 3,000 wolves, making an enemy of the Alpha's brother is just the beginning of her problems. Theron released her slowly, stepping back to give her space. Now that they were alone, some of the fierce intensity had faded from his expression, replaced with something gentler: concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. Kira wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the hall. I don't know what just happened. I claimed you publicly, it's binding." "But why?" the question burst out of her. "You don't know me, we've spoken maybe 3 times, and she gestured helplessly at herself. "Everything your brother said was true, I'm nobody, I have nothing to offer you." "Do you believe that?" Theron asked quietly. "Yes, no, I don't know." Kira felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. "This doesn't make sense. You could have anyone, someone from a powerful family, someone beautiful and educated, and—" "I don't want anyone, I want you." The simple certainty in his voice made her breath catch. "How can you possibly know that?" Theron moved closer but slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "The first day you arrived," he said, "I was standing at the window of my study reviewing border reports. I saw you walk through the gates, and my wolf recognized you instantly. It was like lightning, like finding something I'd been missing without knowing it was gone." "That's impossible," Kira whispered. "I thought so too. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just curiosity about a stranger. But then I spoke to you in the hall after dinner and I knew my wolf knew." He reached up, his hand hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her but wasn't sure he was allowed. "I've been fighting it for 3 days, Kira, telling myself you were here for my brother, that I had no right to interfere. But tonight, when he humiliated you," his jaw clenched, "I couldn't stand by anymore." "I won't apologize for that." "I'm not asking you to," Kira said. Her mind was reeling, trying to process everything. "But what you just did, you've made enemies, your brother. We'll get over it, or he won't. Either way, it doesn't change what I know to be true." "Which is?" "That you're mine, that you've been mine since the moment you walked through those gates, that my wolf will accept no other mate." His hand finally made contact, fingers brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. "The question is whether you can accept that, accept me." Could she? Less than an hour ago, she'd been standing in front of a crowd being torn apart by mockery and rejection. Now the most powerful alpha she'd ever met was telling her she belonged to him, was looking at her like she was precious instead of worthless. It felt like a dream, or a trap. "What if I can't do this?" she asked. "What if I'm not strong enough to be your mate? What if—" "Then we'll figure it out together," Theron interrupted. "I'm not asking you to be perfect, Kira, I'm asking you to stay, to give us a chance." Us, like they were already a unit. Like her answer to his claim had bound them together in a way that couldn't easily be undone. Maybe it had. "I'll stay," she said finally. "I don't understand this and I'm terrified, but I'll stay." The smile that crossed Theron's face transformed him, made him look younger, almost vulnerable. "That's all I'm asking." He offered her his hand, and after a moment's hesitation she took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and for the first time since arriving at the Silvermoon pack, Kira felt like maybe, just maybe, she might actually belong somewhere. She had no idea how wrong she was about what was coming, how much worse things would get before they got better, how many wolves in that pack would rather see her destroyed than accept her as their future lunar queen. But in that moment, with Theron's hand in hers, she let herself believe the worst was over. It was just beginning. End of part 1. Want to know what happens when an entire pack turns against the girl their Alpha King claimed? When the Alpha's brother plots revenge? When Kira discovers she's not just an outsider, she might be something far more dangerous? Drop a comment and let me know if you want part 2, because this story is about to get intense.